I think that's true.
That in reality we're saying, come to the danger zone.
That's right. I think there is a sense in which I think Swedenborg knew from the Christian tradition that this involves a death and a resurrection, and he went through a number of deaths in a way, and the most significant one I think was when he was in his mid-50s. Not an easy, simple path, and not a walking up the stairs.
No.
Not a simple walk up the stairs, but a collapse, much more like what Swedenborg says about caterpillars and butterflies. That basically we are caterpillars, and there is a butterfly that we may turn into, but we'll be virtually unrecognizable if we achieve that point, and there's a cocoon stage in between about which little is known. It must be terrifying to go into the cocoon and just dissolve into goo and wonder what it'll be like when you emerge from the other end in a heavenly state.
And this is fundamentally a Christian theology.
That's right.
And I want to point out that this was not a man looking to start a church.
That's absolutely true. Yet Swedenborg made no effort to start any sort of organization. He had a stammer. He was not much of a public speaker. He much preferred to write, and he was not. He didn't try to garner a following. I think he was deeply moved when people found truth in what he wrote, because he had devoted his life to it, and that it meant something to him. And he did have some people who you might characterize as followers before he died, Dr. Beyer and Dr. Rosaine and others. And he was obviously very moved when they looked at what he had written and felt there was some truth in it. But he didn't attempt to start any sort of a following. He did distribute his books. He sent them out to the universities, and I think he felt that the books would be the carrier. I have a colleague at Bryn Athyn College who's written of the religion of the charismatic book, she says, because she believes that this was sort of a literary attempt rather than having a prophet crying in the wilderness. The books would carry the message and just find some sort of a following.
You know, and I'm going to use this opportunity. I'm holding in my hands, and Dr. Rose had brought this along, a first edition of Emmanuel Swedenborg's writings. For all you people out there who are bibliophiles right now and swooning, I don't blame you. I would be too. And this book, I want to point out, you know, I've seen a number of translations. It's, of course, written in the scholarly Latin.
That's right.
Of the time. Beautifully well preserved, but he uses some pictures that are just phenomenally interesting. And do you reproduce these pictures in the?
Yes, in the New Century Edition, it's something I felt very strongly about, that there was an aspect of the text that's been missing from all prior translations,
Yes.
which is that there are ornaments throughout the works, and I believe that some of them may have been produced by Swedenborg himself because he had learned engraving as one of the trades that he learned. And some of these seem to have symbolic value. They all clearly demarcate portions of the text, so that if he uses a head ornament, it's tantamount to saying this is a new book or a grand section of the book. Mm-hmm. Line ornaments would break portions of the text, a tail ornament at the end of a chapter, and that sort of thing. But also there are images, the symbolism. One of my favorites is at the very first page of text in his Secrets of Heaven, his great work that came out in 8 quarto volumes. That was his first published theological work. And it has a man digging in the garden, and it seems to suggest this cultivation motif, this turning of earth, and also some sense, I guess, of the death and rebirth that's involved in all gardening and cultivation and this sort of thing. So I think that he had a hand in these, and the New Century Edition's going to reproduce them all in place. We've had them all scanned, and they'll be as part of the text again, which hasn't been true since the first editions in the 1700s.
And it's a absolutely beautiful thing to hold. It's got a velvet, kind of a velvet cover. I just want to maybe take a vacation and read the thing, but I know Dr. Rose is going to take it back with him when he leaves today. And I do think that's very important. I mean, he obviously was talking a great deal about aesthetics.
Yes.
There was a great many different types of aesthetics in his work, a great deal of type of poetry of the psalm variety, and
That's right.
And I think beginning and ending with these things. I was looking at the drawings, and I've studied symbols for quite a number of years, and this stuff is important. You need to talk to these people and get a copy of this book, if for no other reason, just to take a look at the pictures.
Yeah, and Swedenborg himself, an aspect of his life I hadn't mentioned, but it's very significant to me, is that his first number of publications were poetry. He started out as a poet and also an inventor of machines to help with the mining industry, but the first several volumes that he put out were poetry or poetical prose. And then he abandoned that style of writing for scientific manner, sort of explanatory writing, and continued that right up until the Revelatory period. And right as his spiritual eyes were opened, he wrote a work called The Worship and Love of God, which is very rich and beautiful and seems to partake of the former period of his life with the scientific investigation, but is also full of classical allusions and metaphors. Starts with him walking in the garden in the fall, and the leaves are falling, and he starts to think about the ages of humankind, the golden age and the silver age, and how we're at the end of the ages, he says. And he's envisioning a rebirth, a new kind of golden age. In his published theological works, as he went along, there was more and more poetry that became a part of his writing. And these narratives of his spiritual experiences, which is sort of a poetical form, storytelling, and analogies. And these two great threads of his life, the kind of scientist who's explaining things with the left side of the brain, and the poet. He was an avid theater goer. He loved sculpture. He was a musician. He was a cathedral organist at one point in his life, and one of the few objects he had in this summer house where he wrote all these books was an organ, a very beautiful pipe organ that I got to play myself in Sweden, with a warm, fluty tone. It's got wooden pipes and mahogany keys, and he would play in between writing. So these two sides of the brain come together in this last and crowning published work, which is entitled True Christianity, where he has a very left brain, ordered, sequential approach to theology, God the Creator, the Lord the Redeemer, the Holy Spirit. Here's Reformation and Regeneration. There's it's working all the way through the canon, but interspersed with these poetical analogies, complete with poetical diction. An English comparable word would be the briny deep, or something that you only hear in literature. Words like this coming into these poetical analogies and these narratives of spiritual experiences that are remarkable. I had a student study the balance of imagery with sort of abstract left brain prose, and it came out 53% imagery, word for word. What was going on was slightly over the side into poetry and the language of music and beauty.
Wow.
That's a remarkable end to his publishing career. I'll be translating that work myself for the New Century Edition. I'm very much looking forward to tackling it.